I want to take the time out to show you the secrets to a long life. The secrets to a long life. I was watching Paternity Court, and there's two different scenes that I saw where you had these young girls that grew up not knowing their father, or they grew up with the idea that a guy was their father, and then later found that it was not their father. The thing that stood out to me the most is the fact that they had so much anger and resentment towards this guy. One girl was extremely disrespectful, to the point where I thought myself that even if that was his child, if I were in his shoes, I would have nothing to do with her. Although the anger was misdirected and is believed to have come from her mother. Unfortunately, we have situations where there are so many young people that grow up without their dads, and because of the fact that the mother raised them, the mother has every opportunity to feed that child's mind with negativity regarding the father. So when the child finally meets his or her father, they have a lot of questions, which there's nothing wrong with questioning. Where were you? Why were you never there for me? Why did you run out and leave me? And then take the time out to listen to what he says. Put aside the fact that you love your moms. Put aside the facts that your moms raised you. Put aside the fact that you feel that you love the moms and you think the dad is a deadbeat. Put that completely aside and talk to the man. Don't be judgmental. Don't have any type of pre-judgmental thoughts or judgments towards him. Listen to what he says. There's always two sides to a story. I'm going to repeat. There's always two sides to the story. Or better yet, there's three sides to the story. There's the mother's truth, the alleged father's truth, and then there's the truth. Because both sides, the mom and dad, may have their own account of what happened, but then when the truth comes out, it exposes both the mom and the dad, or one or the other. So never have any preconceived judgment towards your dad. And be careful not to dishonor your father. Because there's reasons, and you wonder why we find that so many young people are dying early in this era. I grew up in an era where the parents would go before the children, but now you have so many parents that's burying their children, and there's reason behind that. There are so many laws, so many universal laws that were broken. And most of those laws were broken unaware because they died not knowing God. Because in most cases, the parents did not know God. The parents might have grown up in church. They might have had some knowledge regarding the Bible. But they did not have a relationship. They did not have that connection with the Most High God. Now, I want to read a scripture taken from Ephesians, the 6th chapter, reading the first 4 verses. And it reads as follows. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. The second verse reads, and I want you to pay close attention to the second verse, because even if you grew up in the church and you're familiar with this scripture, there's something that you've never seen before. And I'm going to bring that out right now. The second verse reads, honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with promise. I'm going to read that again. Honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with promise. Now, what you've never paid attention to was with promise. What did he mean by when he said with promise? What promise is he talking about? Well, the third verse explains that promise. That if you honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with promise, the third verse reads, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. That's the promise that God made to you if you honor your father and your moms. Now, I'm sure you've never heard that portion, because people are quick to quote scriptures, but they never take time out to tell the whole truth. And when you leave out the whole truth, that partial truth becomes a lie. And that's the same type of lie that the serpent told in the Garden of Eden. He did not tell the full truth. He told the truth, but he didn't tell the full truth. And maybe I'll deal with that in another video at a later time. But it says, honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. What promise is that? That it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. Now, there are so many young people and even older people now that's in their late 20s, 30s, and even 40s that say, I grew up without my father. I never knew my father, or I had an idea who my father was. I shared a story in the past. I went into Little Caesars Pizza one night to get some pizza for my sons. This is when they were much younger. And there was a young man behind the counter. He looked like he stood about maybe 6'4", 6'5". He was pretty tall. He was a pretty big dude. And every time I walked inside Little Caesars, this dude would just stare at me. He would gawk at me to the point where I started feeling uncomfortable. I'm like, why is this dude staring at me, right? And usually in the hood, you say something. If somebody stared at you a little too long, you address that. Yo, what's up, man? What you looking at, right? Not like that, but you address the situation. And the dude kept staring at me. He kept staring at me. So every time I went inside Little Caesars, this dude would just sit there and stare at me. Now, he's the one that's preparing the pizzas. He's making the pizzas. So he can do anything to pizzas, man. I don't know what he's doing. He can spin in it. He can do whatever he do. I don't know. I just know that whenever I went in there, and I wasn't trying to make this dude mad, because he's handling my food. So every time I went in there, he just stared at me. And he would stop. He would literally stop doing what he's doing to stare at me. So one night, I went into Little Caesars, And the dude was in there by himself. So he was managing the front and he was, preparing the pizzas in the back. And I walked in and he said to me, he said, "Hey, yo, man," he says, "Are you my dad?" And that completely caught me off guard. I was completely taken off guard. I'm like, I really didn't know how to respond. He asked me like, "Are you my dad?" And I said, "Oh, bro, I ain't do it, man. It wasn't me. It wasn't me." And he said that his mother showed him a picture of a man, and the man looked like me. The man resembled me. And I said, "What's your mom's name, man?" And he told me his mother's name. I said, "No, I don't know your mother, man." I said, "That's not me, bro." And he said, "Okay." But I kind of felt bad in my heart for him because of the fact that he did not know his dad. He only saw a photo of his dad. And it makes me wonder how he would respond if he finally meet his dad. Would he be angry like a lot of people are? Because they may crave for their dad, and then when they get the opportunity to meet their dad, they have so many questions, so much anger that the mother instilled in them that they end up chasing the guy away. They end up messing up the opportunity to actually build a relationship with your dad. In return, you're also hindering the length of your life and the blessings that you could receive in life if you honor your father and your moms. So there are so many out there that dishonor their dad because the father, for whatever reason, and much of the reason is not his own fault. See, and a lot of young people know that it's not his fault, but because of the fact that the mother raised them, and within them they have so much guilt that's in their hearts, they don't want to make it appear that they turn their backs on their mother. My moms were there for me. She raised me. I love my moms. I'm not going to turn my back on my mom. So what they do is they take that aggression and that anger and they redirect it towards their dad. And they really don't give their fathers a chance to explain what happened. They never give the father a chance to give his account of what happens. And then after you receive the account, and I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of dudes out there, more than you can imagine, that's quite honest. Dudes are more honest than women, in my opinion. Because there's a lot of guys out there that will straight up tell you it was my fault. I wasn't there. I should have been there. I wish I could go back and change things. And then there's dudes that's just straight up deadbeats. They straight up tell you, "Man, I don't want nothing to do with them kids. F them kids." And we hear that on YouTube quite often. F them kids. So dudes are usually pretty honest, and they'll tell you if they really want anything to do with you. And then there's those guys that claim to want to have a relationship with their kids, but they don't know how. See, they make promises to their children or alleged children and then don't deliver. And when they don't deliver, then it only validates what the mother had been saying about you all along. Right? So at least give your dad the chance. And I think that when a lot of people, young people and older people, start trying to make things right between you and your father or you and your moms, that will make life a lot better for you. Even if the father or the moms renege. Even if they renege and don't keep their promise, God will bless you and give you long life upon the earth. So it says, the third verse, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. So God makes a promise to you. This is a promise of God, man. And how many promises do you see throughout the Bible? For those of you that studied the Bible, for those of you that grew up in church, how many promises, direct promises, did you ever hear from God where it says, with promise? So God promised you a good life, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. We hear in the Bible about how people live to be 900 and some odd years of age and 800 and some odd years of age. And if you notice throughout time, from the time of creation, as time began to evolve and people begin to evolve on earth, notice that the length of life started shortening. Every time they give the genealogy of someone, they start living shorter and shorter and shorter lives upon the earth. They go from 900 and some odd years to like 700 and some odd years or 500 and some odd years. Life start decreasing upon earth. Or your life expanse on earth begin to start decreasing. The final verse I want to read is the 4th verse, which reads, and ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath. Now, keep in mind, what stood out to me was the fact that in the first verse, or better yet, in the second verse, it says, I'm going to go to the first verse. In the first verse, it says, obey your parents, which means both mother and father. Obey your parents in the Lord. Why? Because this is right. This is the right thing to do. The second verse, it says, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment, with promise, that it may be well with thee, and thou mayest live long on the earth. But then in the 4th verse, it leaves out the mother. The 4th verse reads, ye fathers, not the mothers, provoke not your children to wrath. Don't provoke them to anger, but bring them up. This is a commandment to the fathers. This is a charge that fathers have to keep. A charge they have from God. To provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. It did not tell the mother to bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, but it says to the father, this is your charge. This is your responsibility. So if you're not in the home and your child goes astray, or your child dies in the street like animals, either at the hands of each other or at the hands of police, it's your fault because you were not there. For whatever reason, you weren't there to be the rightful protector of your children. Now, it's easy for women to say, I'm the man and the woman. You don't want that responsibility, woman. You don't want that responsibility, because the minute you stand up and say that you are the father, you're both mother and father, guess what? You reap the father's judgment. Because you stepped in the shoes that you weren't qualified to walk in. So now you accept the judgment of the fathers. When the father says, provoke not your child to wrath, how many mothers are provoking their sons and daughters to anger? And you can simply do that just by keeping the father out of their lives, or telling lies on the father to make the child dislike and hate the father. You did that, mothers. So you stepped into an arena that you really should not be in, that you really don't want to be in, because now you're now taking on the judgment of the father, because you stood up and said, I'm both mother and father. But it's giving the fathers a commandment. For you females out there that think that you're the father, it's giving you a commandment. And you fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So it's almost like it's expected for the father to have conflict with the children. And it's expected because of the fact that the father is the strong man of the house. It's the father the one that issues the punishment. It's the fathers that are strict and stern. The mothers are usually loving and caring. Supposed to be. So because of the fact that the father is the mean guy of the house, the children are going to look more at the father as, I can't hang out with my friends, I can't do nothing, I'm bored, and then they're going to resist in many cases if that man don't have control of his house. If he does not have his house in order, and the scripture is talking about a family that's got both mother and father in it. Now, if the father's in the home, that commandment does not apply to the moms. It does not say, and ye mothers, provoke your child not to anger, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. This is the father's responsibility. The father's the provider. He's the protector. So women, when you take on the responsibility and you come out and you say, I'm both mom and dad, well, guess what? You're going to reap the wrath and the judgment that fathers that provoke their children to anger, you're going to reap those judgments. And that's why we find women are catching so much hell. Mothers, single parent moms catch so much hell that in many cases you brought upon yourself because you made it possible for that man not to be in their kid's life. You made it possible for that man not to be in those kids' life, and you made it possible for those kids to grow up without their father. And then when they finally meet their dad, they're angry and they're bitter, putting them in a position where it's bringing them down the same path of judgment that you're traveling. Children are not supposed to be that disrespectful to their parents. If your father wasn't there, go on about your business. I would rather just hold my peace. There's a song we used to sing in church. If I hold my peace and let the Lord fight my battles, if the Lord is in your life, if I hold my peace and let the Lord fight my battle, victory shall be mine. I don't have to try to fight the battles for God. Those are God's battles to fight. Because if that man does not do his responsibility in the family, he has to deal with God on that level. But if the mom steps in the way of that relationship between the child and the father, then that mother is now bringing judgment upon herself and upon her children that brings disrespect to the father. So the best thing for you to do, even if you have questions, if you have doubts, if you question why your dad is not there, and you have to be careful not to dishonor him, because that is your father. What you should do is try to be better than your dad. Try not to follow the same path that your dad followed. And in most cases, it's hard. It's hard because there's so many men out there that want to be in their child's life, but it's blocked. The mother and the law make it possible for that man not to be there. And for a child, like on that paternity court, this one female, I don't need you now. I'm an adult. I'm grown. I don't need you. That's not the point. If that man is telling you, I have doubts because there are so many promiscuous females out there. So men in this era have every right to question paternity and should never sign a birth certificate if you're not sure that's your child. So feedback, tell me what you think. That's the secret, or one of the secrets, to a long life, is to honor your father and your moms, that it may be well with you and that you may have long life upon the earth. So feedback, tell me what you think, subscribe, click on the Cash App, support this channel. Until next time, I'm fearless.